Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Ash Couchman, and I cannot wait to find moments of joy with you today. We're going to dive straight into today's words to live by. Let's dive into the Word of God.
Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12.
Now, I have a very, very wonderful lady on the podcast with me this week. You may have heard her once before on the potty. Actually, it was a while ago now.
It was early on. Yeah.
Early on. I have the wonderful Kate with me on the podcast this week. Now, Kate, I would love you just to give us like a 30-second, 1 minute. Who are you? How did you end up sitting here today? Tell me a little bit about you. And also, in case our listeners didn't hear your last few episodes, give them a bit of context.
Absolutely. Well, I am part of the Light family. I've worked at the station for about 10 years in a multiple range of different jobs. And I also do some on-air announcing and work in our donor care team. So it's a joy to be part of this organisation. I absolutely love it. I'm originally from Sydney, grew up in a missionary family, love living in Melbourne. I'm a cat lady, slightly obsessed. I'm single, I live with some housemates. I call the joys of my life my 6 nibblings, which is my nieces and nephews. Have you heard that term? I love it.
No.
Nibblings. Because you're always like, oh, my nieces and nephews, so long. My nibblings, joy of my life. And I really, really love Jesus. I've loved him since I was really young. I'm a singer, performer, worship leader, and I just have a lot of energy. I'm in my worm and gardening era at the moment, so there's lots of plant and recycling chats in the office. But I just love to be able to talk about life and love and how do we do this together?
Yeah.
How do we live this life? Because it's messy and complicated, but there's always an answer in relationship with God. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think something that's so incredible about you, Kate, and I don't know if I've ever said this to you before. When I first met you, we were kind of like ships in the night, right? Like I'd see you sometimes
Very
through a
randomly.
window. I'd say hi, but I never really got to spend much time with you. And it's now that you're in the office, it's been so great to get to know you more. But something that I've always admired and respected and loved about you is you always have such a joy, and your love for Jesus and your love for God's people has always been so evident in the small moments that I got to have with you in the past, and then now getting to see it more and more in who you are. You are everything that this podcast, that this community, that, you know, who God calls us to be. You really embody that in an authentic way. And so I'm glad to have you on the podcast because you're the exact kind of person that helps us to see the joy and the goodness of God, even when things don't go the right way, even when maybe what our plans were doesn't happen. It's this beautiful thing of, but at the same time, and at the end of the day, God's got it.
Absolutely.
And I love that that's your heart in
thank
everything.
you. So kind of you.
It's
and
my pleasure.
Surprisingly, I do get a lot of feedback about that, you know.
Really?
And I talk about how I might have 1 or 2 bad days a year, but it's because I'm an optimist. I'm an uber optimist.
That's
and so
amazing.
even on my worst day, I'm like, well, tomorrow can be better. And so can I tell you a quick little joke?
Yeah, please
I heard
do.
someone say recently that pessimists are usually right, but optimists are usually happy. And I thought, I love that so much.
I honestly think I have realized, and the more I meet people like you, Kate, the more I'm like, I'm such a Debbie Downer. I'm like, I'm so negative. And I love when I hear you speak like that, because I know for myself, and probably for a lot of our listeners, that's the way our mindset goes. We go straight to the worst.
Yep.
We go straight to the sad. We go straight to the end of the world. Whereas when you look at it from that perspective, you go, it's okay, tomorrow will be better. God's got it.
There's definitely challenges with being an uber and optimist, so it's not like it's better, but it is easier to, I will say, to walk through life with being a little bit
and
less
bounce back
burdened.
from those
yeah,
things.
absolutely, bouncing back. So I'm grateful for how God's made me, and I want to make sure I keep developing that and growing in that.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that. We're looking at 1 Timothy 4 verse 12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. what comes to mind when you hear this?
Well, I actually said, can we talk about this verse?
Yeah, this is Kate's. Please.
Please. One of my kind of life verses, and if maybe people who are listening who are like, what does that mean? It's kind of a verse that maybe when you grow up in church, you realize that this really is part of my direction from God. This is an overarching theme that it keeps coming up over and over again. It's a sense of this is the call or the purpose that I have for you. Yeah. And the thing that stands out to me about this verse is about being an example. And my dad is still a man of integrity, and he would really challenge me that it's in the small things that make a difference, that God looks to see, are you being obedient? Are even things like, are you making your bed in the morning, or picking up that bit of rubbish, or walking the long way instead of just cutting through things. It's the little things like that that God looks at. And so I want to seek to be that, and I think because of this verse, it's saying how can you be an example. And I also have found myself in lots of places of leadership, but I keep coming back to that leadership is actually not about being in charge, it's about being an example. And there are a lot of leaders who are in charge, and you have to do what they say because they're the boss, and there are a lot of leaders that show you the way, and that's what Jesus did for us. He didn't demand or cajole. He said, this is the way you should live, and he modeled it, and he showed us that his passion for the Father and his obedience to the voice of God. He showed us compassion for people, and he said, this is how you live. And so for me, this verse as well, talking about don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. I am not as young as I was. Now I'm in my early 40s, let's say, and I can say, Kate, don't let anyone look down on you just because you're 42 or you're 50 or you're 70, that you can still be a woman of example, and that it is an opportunity in all areas of life. And I probably would say that this verse really speaks to me about it's not about getting it right. And I think I felt pressure about that when I was younger as I was exploring this relationship with God. Yeah, because you have to be an example. You can't get it wrong. And so my optimism, my responsibility, my leadership positions was meaning that I felt pressure about that. But I definitely got some revelation as I was going through that. It was that so much incredible transformation happens is in the example of I made a mess. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I got that wrong. I missed the mark there. That's as much an example and a valuable life-changing example for people when you own up to your stuff with joy and humility. And then you clean up your mess. And the Bible talks about making restitution. I mean, even just the other day, I accidentally stole a tub from Kmart.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I thought I bought 2, but I got home with 3 of them. And I was like, all right, so this weekend I'm going back to Kmart to buy. And I was thinking, how do I tell them, hi, I accidentally took something extra. I don't know how. I just have to go up and say, look, can I please pay for this? I took it home. And I don't know whether they'll be shocked about it or not, but that's part of this thing, that it's that deep internal, God, even if, now that I've told everyone, but even if nobody ever saw that, that's a part of that being an example, because primarily I'm doing it for God.
Totally.
And I want to be obedient and faithful to God. And then if others see that and are a part of that, great. But primarily it's a gift to God. I
love what you said before about how Jesus wasn't out here forcing people to follow him and forcing them to be like him. But when people see him, when people saw him, they went, hey, I want to be just like that. Like I want what he has. Yeah. And it's the same, like you said, for us as believers, you want people to go, you know what, I want what they have. I want that joy. I want that discipline. I want that authenticity. And I love that you've kind of gone, hey, but it has to come from example. For me, probably what hits me the most is that whole don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. And I think what you said before was great. That's not just if you're 15 or 20 or 30. That's if you are 50, 60, 70, no matter what age. I think it's this thing of going, don't disqualify yourself.
Absolutely.
I talk to so many elderly, beautiful Christian women at church, right? Who you go, oh, like, why wouldn't you do this? And they go, it's not my thing, not my time. I've had my time. And it's like,
or someone else. I don't want to take the spot for someone else. Yeah,
completely. And so it's this thing of you can set an example. You can be that example. Don't be intimidated by what God has put on your life, whether it's, in your 70s or whether it's you in your 20s or your teens or your 30s or your 40s. And I guess I've just seen how when people, and even myself, I've had moments where, you know, I lead teams at church and in different situations where I'm leading people who are 30, 40 years older than me.
Yes.
And to be honest, the first thing that comes to mind when I make a mistake or when I don't do something well, or when someone goes, hey, Mick, maybe you should try this, I go, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Someone else knows this better. Just completely pull yourself out of this situation. But I think it's actually exactly what you said. It's not about knowing everything and being perfect, but it's about doing your best and learning from those around you. And just because you're young doesn't mean, even just because of your age doesn't mean that it's not good enough or it's not what God's called you to. Is there a time where this verse has come alive for you?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely when I was quite young, I had this kind of miraculous situation, I think when I was about 13, and I'd always felt like, I grew up in a missionary family working with YWAM, and my parents, it was a great experience of being around people who were loving on God and discovering God. But I was like, I don't want to do that, you know. And then I remember God speaking at an Easter camp in Tamworth, and it was just a beautiful moment, and I had this sense of I found my vision, I found my purpose. And he spoke to me very much about working youth ministry, and that, you know, that was for a good portion of my life where I worked in that space. But it was that thing of, well, I'm only, 13 or 14. What can I do? How can I make an impact? And that's kind of where this verse started to come out again and again. I would hear it in a song, or it would be spoken about at church, and you just know God's speaking to me about that. I think what you were saying there about not disqualifying ourselves, isn't that again the biggest challenge? It's not actually about what we think, it's about what God thinks about us and what God knows about us. And that's a constant challenge to be realigning. But is that truth? That's how I feel. But God, what is the truth? And that again, that idea of changing our thinking and working our mindset and renewing our mind so that we know I'm going to choose to think about what God knows about me. And so God knows that I'm valuable and I have a purpose. And actually it's less about my capacity and more about my obedience. I think about the boy who with the loaves and fishes. He was the least capable. He probably didn't even have any money, but he gave what he had. He was available. He said, I don't care that I'm young. I've got something to offer. I'm going to step forward. And it's always so amazing. It wasn't a businessman or even a mother or a fisherman with all his big catch. It was the least of those, and yet he said, I'm available. And I think for me, the times, not like I have a worldwide ministry, and that's definitely not what I seek, but I think I get opportunities to talk to people, to connect, because I say, I'm here, I'm available. That whole thing of, God, let me be your hands and feet. And so that, I think that's the challenge of this verse is, are we going to believe what God says about us? Otherwise, we're going to believe what we assume other people think, that they're looking down on us or that we're not good enough. Just like you said, I've made a mistake and then that disqualifies me from this. Or I'm 80, what do I have to offer the world? Well, what does God say about you? And that's probably the most important thing about that verse, because if we believe that, then I'm going to go, all right, I'm a woman of influence, or I'm a man who brings peace into chaos. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk into every room carrying that. And that's the most important thing. What does God think and know and say about us? And then allowing that to change and renew our minds.
No matter your age, your life is a testimony. When we speak with kindness, act in love, and walk in faith, we reflect the character of Christ. I want you to ask yourself, what kind of an example am I setting today? How am I walking out my faith? Remembering that God calls us to be His light wherever we go. I hope that today's episode encouraged you, and I cannot wait to continue to dive into the Word of God with you tomorrow. Until then, I pray you're able to find moments of joy.